So, hello everyone. Today we're gonna talk with Rémi about a remote command execution that we found on the Livewire component, which is a Laravel component, actually. So, we are both working at Inactive, which is a French company specialized in offensive security. We are doing some penetration testing, reverse engineering, development, etc. We are almost more than 2,000 experts, over 6 offices in France. And of course, we are working with companies all around the world. So who are we? I'm Pierre and here is my colleague Rémi. We are both doing penetration testing and some research, especially on PHP stuff, but most of it. So today we're going to talk about Livewire. So I will introduce to you what's Livewire, how it's working. Then Rémi will talk about the Unmarshalling chain that we found inside Livewire to execute some commands inside synthesizers. Then we will show a demonstration of the actual exploit, and we will conclude with some thoughts. So, what's Livewire? Livewire is what's said on their website, a full-stack framework to build real-time features on web interfaces. As some developers here know, when you are doing some PHP stuff, when you are updating objects on your front end, you have to reload the page for the actual updates to be taken into account on the web page. But Livewire just take this off, like as we know with Next.js, for example. We are linking front-end objects with back-end objects, and the update is like in real time. You don't have the users to update the page to get actually the updates on the page. According to Buzzswift, we have like more than 150k applications that are based on Livewire, so it's kind of used, but not the most, but it's used actually. So, as a developer, if you want to build some things with Livewire, you have to do 3 things. You have to define the components, you have to define the route that is pointing to this component, and of course a view to be rendered to the actual user. So you can see on your right an example of a code that just a counter for the example. But yeah, user can increment or decrement the counter on his web page. You see here the routes that are used inside the application. We are linking the /counter route with the counter class that we see before, and the actual blade view, which is used in Laravel. So what's happening? So it's pretty bad CSS, sorry, but yeah, it's kind of an example. So user can increment or decrement the actual counter on the page. And for example, when you click on the plus, we can see a post request that is made to the /Livewire/update endpoints, which is always the same because it's what Livewire defines internally. And this post request will actually update the front-end objects and the back-end objects so that all is synchronized. So what we see here, the post request that is sent contains some JSON data. And the JSON is pretty fat, to be honest. We have a token, which is actually a CSRF token to avoid attackers to use these endpoints from other websites, obviously. Then, as a first thing, we send the path and the method, which are where are we on the web page and what was the method to access this web page. Actually, it's just a GET request to the /counter, but it can be obviously more than that. We have a calls, which is what method should be called when the user click on the button. So, for example, here, just the increment function that we see in this component. And on the third part, we have some data like how was the object actually on the web page. So the counter has value 1, but now we want to increment it, so it will be value 2. But the backend needs to know what was the actual parameter value before doing his things on the backend. And of course, we have a checksum, which is a hash generated by the server for all methods that can be called on this page. Because as you might imagine, you can call any function that you want on the PHP class. So the server must know which method you want to use, because if someone can use any method that he knows, that can do some bad things. So yeah, there is a checksum, which is based on the Laravel app key. So that the server is knowing that this is a legitimate request, actually. How does Livewire works? They are using what they call synthesizers. So synthesizer has just custom JSON types that allows dehydrated, so serialized, or hydrated, so unserialized. And Livewire offers several default synthesizers for generic custom types. We put 3 in this presentation, but there is like 10 more. So WRBL, which is a writable value, STR, of course, a stringable object, and one that Rémi will talk later about, which is CLCTN, a low-level collection that can convert objects from arrays, etc. And just for the notes, in a Livewire codebase, any class that is extended from the synth main class can potentially be used as a valid synthesizer. And of course, in the synthesizer mechanism, we have some embedded objects. You can embed class into class, etc., which allows recursive iteration, so recursive unmarshalling on several objects. And in Livewire, by default, there is 3 of them, CLCTN, Form, and MDL, which can be used to do that. So, what a synthesizer looks like. The one you see here, we present it because this is the one that we abuse in our Unmarshalling chain. It's the CLCTN, so collection synth synthesizers. So you have to define a key for it to be called. When you make your post request, you actually define which objects you are requesting with the JSON post data, the value, which is what you want to do with the object, actually, the metadata that just represents some metadata about the actual object, and the idle child function, which will be defined in the actual class to tell Livewire what to do with the actual received object. And as you may see on line 12, if you control the metadata of the object, you are able to instantiate any PHP class that you want with a controlled value. Of course, the value must be an array because it's defined like that in the code, and if you send other things than an array, it will crash. But if you control the metadata, you can send what you want. So yeah, that's, as an attacker, pretty cool. What you need for that, I told you when I presented, you have a checksum which is generated by the server. So you need a valid checksum for it to be accepted by Livewire. So for this exploitation, you need the app key and, of course, a valid Livewire request. Because the checksum generation is this actual code, which just take the key from Laravel, generate a hashmark, and when you send a post request, the following function will be executed. We'll take the snapshot, so the actual content of the JSON data, which is important and what Rémi will talk about later. It generates again a checksum, check it with the one that is contained into the request, and if it doesn't match, just shut down the request with a status code error and telling that the payload is corrupted, actually. So, for our exploitation, you need to have the Laravel app key to be able to do nasty things. And I will now let Rémi present about the Unmarshalling chain that we found.
So, now that Pierre explained to you what is Livewire, I will try to dig and give you tools to understand how it's done in PHP side and how PHP does everything behind the scene, I mean. So first of all, I need to explain to you what is a PHP magic method, so it will be easier to explain the full Unmarshalling chain afterwards. So, according to PHP main documentation, magic methods are special methods which override PHP's default action when certain actions are performed on an object. So to put it in simple words, it's actions that will be triggered during PHP object lifetime. There are several of them. So the most common one will be the constructor. It's the same, on other languages such as Java or C# or whatever. There will be constructors. In PHP, it will be called when you do a new object and you can pass parameters to it. There are others such as toString, which will be called when you do, for example, a string cast or when you try to print an object value. It has to be transformed in a string, so you have to have this magic method to transform it to a valid string. There are others such as invoke. In PHP, you can consider that an object will be also considered as a callable functions. So, for example, if you got an object with parentheses like that, it will trigger the invoke function under the hood. There are other ones, for example, destruct, which will be automatically called when the object is no longer considered as being used inside PHP. This one will be called as long as one object is created in PHP. So when you've got an object, you will have a call to destruct. And the last one, which is pretty interesting, is the wake up function, which will be called when you have unserialization. And in our case, we don't work with unserialization, but with unmarshalling, which is not the same. And fun fact about that, most of unserialization gadgets chains working on PHP will be patched inside the wake up function. So actually, we will bypass most of patches. So now, how do we select an unmarshalling gadget? A good unmarshalling gadget has to have three main purposes. First one is to be compatible with one of Livewire's synthesizer. As explained Pierre earlier, we will trigger unmarshalling from the synthesizers themselves, so they have to be compatible with them. It also needs to have one purpose, so we will be able to change them between one with each other, and so to be able to have a full working chain. And finally, the best and easier tip, since most unserialization gadgets are patched inside the wake up, what we can look for is all gadgets which are already patched against unserialization, but will still work in our case since we are doing arbitrary instantiation, which is called unmarshalling. So if you like to play and to do CTF with PHP or stuff like that, you may already know this one, the FNStream gadget. So basically, FNStream gadget will be compatible with the CLCTN synthesizer, the Laravel collection one, and it allows to do one simple thing. We'll have an arbitrary call to any PHP function or to any invoke function from any object that is embedded inside your Laravel project. So this one is really powerful and will be one of the main triggers for the overall full gadget chain. So there are two ways to trigger it. One from the destruct, so you just need for the object to die and to trigger the function you like, or from the toString version. And for some reason, we were not able to trigger it from the destruct, just waiting for the object to die because there is an answer from Laravel before what. So we had to find another way to call an arbitrary function from PHP. To do so, we found a second gadget, which is called the shared prefix public URL generator gadget. Pretty complicated name, but anyway, you just need to understand one thing from this one. It will trigger a strong typing from an object, which will call the toString function. And as I said, the FNStream gadget can be triggered from its toString version. The first thing we would like to do is to trigger a PHP info function. So to sum up, we will have, for our first step, to get a PHP info. PHP info is a function that will show you the full environment from PHP and other stuff. But anyway, to trigger it, we need two gadgets, FNStream gadget and shared prefix public URL generator gadget. And so by changing both of them, as you can see, we got our first step, a fully working PHP info on a legitimate endpoint, which is Livewire update on the post request. And so, what are our first step? But that's not all. We would like to have a fully working remote command execution. To do so, we need other gadgets. That's why we need to change them between one to another. So this time, we will once more be able to reach it from the FNStream gadget, but this time, we will try to reach an invoke function from an unofficial object, which is a signed gadget. From this point, we will be able to reach the call user array function, which will allow us to call any public function from any Laravel dependency. And as you can see, everything imbricates itself. And this time, we need to find a public function, which will be interesting to get a remote command execution. So this one, we will reach a broadcast event gadget, which contains the dispatch next job in chain function, which will allow you to reach a fully controlled unserialization primitive. I told you earlier that unserialization was patched, etc., etc. Well, that's the case for most gadgets, but in fact, in Laravel, having an unmarshalling in our case was not sufficient to reach a full remote command execution. But from an unserialization, there are a ton of working gadgets to get a remote code execution on Laravel. And so, as you can see there, from the tool PHP-GC, we can check if a gadget chain is compatible to get remote command execution on the latest version of the tool. And as you can see, there are dozens of them that will work on Laravel. So from this point, we just need to have one working remote command execution on Laravel. You just need to pick any of them and it will work. And so from this time, we got the graph, the remote command execution. As you can see, there we have a way to compromise the server. But we thought it was not sufficient. As you can see, there is a server error on this screen, and we would like to be able to trigger it without any log, because, for example, on red team or stuff like that, we need to be stealthy and to find ways to get our hands on powerful primitive without being detected too quickly. So the first step, we need to correct that, to remove the verbose logs and the error. So we need one final gadget to make sure that the server flows stop and to stay sneaky, as I said. Why will it work? First of all, the errors are triggered because Laravel will stop the flow because it won't find any way to work with our gadget chain. So we need to find a way to stop it directly at the end of it. The second reason why it will work is that because we are sending post requests to a legitimate endpoint, which is Livewire update, and so it won't be logged anywhere by default. So by default, if we find a way to stop our command execution right afterward, it will be logless and undetectable in most cases. So this is the final gadget, which is pretty funny because it's from the class terminal. And as you can see from the FN stream, we are able to call the terminal gadget, which will do a call to the exit function. And thanks to this final piece to our full gadget chain, we get a fully sneaky remote command execution on the server, if we have the app key, of course. And so that is basically us after finishing putting everything together to get our fully working payload after 2 to 3 months of researches. And now, that's cool and all, but everyone wants to know how to use it actually, so I will let Pierre show you and demonstrate how you can do so.
Thank you, Rémi. So we implement the exploit in the actual Laravel Crypto Killer tool, which is developed by Rémi and Michael, which is a tool that mainly is used to brute force app keys and mainly get remote command execution on Laravel-based applications through sessions. But we implement the actual Livewire exploit in it because we need the stack to generate the checksum and we need the app key, etc. So how the tool is working, you have an exploit method, which takes the exploit name. Actually, there is only Livewire, but maybe more to come. Of course, we need the app key and a JSON parameter, which is actually the actual JSON post request, which is made to Livewire. So what the tool is doing, it's taking the legitimate request from Livewire, modifying data inside to gain the command execution or the function that you want, recompute the checksum, output the new JSON malicious request, and you just have to copy paste it and send it to the server to gain remote command execution. So maybe a little bit small, but on your left, there is the post JSON data. So if you just take the whole JSON on your left, you paste it into a file and you give it to the tool. So how we are doing here, don't worry about the clear text app key. It's inside the Rémi word list on his public tool. So don't try to copy paste it. But yeah. So now we are executing the Laravel Crypto Killer exploit with the Livewire exploit using the app key, the request, the JSON, and we want to execute the system function with the ID parameter. So it outputs the following JSON that you can find. The checksum is valid because you have the app key, of course. You copy paste it into your favorite tool. We use Burpsuit, but you can use whatever you want. And we gain, again, fully remote command execution. To show you a demonstration, we'll use an open source project, which is called Snipe IT, which is an open source asset management. With Rémi, we parsed some public tools that are using Livewire, and we create some main requests that we know that are using Livewire in the actual project. So you don't have to actually make a request to the server to get the JSON file, as I saw, etc., because they are already in the exploit. So for Snipe IT, they are using Livewire for their authenticate method, for the login or the password, the forget password method. And from that, if you have the app key, you can get remote command execution. So let's go to the demonstration. So you have here the main page of Snipe IT with the send password release link or login. We are just making a request. And as we might not know the app key, we are taking the XSRF token, which is encrypted by Laravel by default with the app key, using the tool from Rémi for that to brute force the app key with all the known ones that we know. And of course, the tool found one valid app key. And as Snipe IT is using Livewire, we are able to trigger remote command execution with the exploit method that I talked about before. And we are using the Livewire exploit. We, of course, copy-paste the app key, the function that we want to use, but before, of course, the JSON file, which contains the actual JSON of the request. The function, so for the POC, will just execute the ID command because it's like usual on owning web servers. So here is the JSON that is output by the tool. Then we just create the curl request to actually exploit the Livewire instance, If you do that, don't forget that this is a JSON file, so you need a content type to application/JSON, else Livewire will crash. Then we copy-paste what's output by Laravel Crypto Killer inside the data and get fully working remote command execution. Thank you. And now I will let Rémi conclude about what we found and what we maybe found more than that.
All right, so little confusion. So first of all, do you think it's a vulnerability? Who thinks it's a vulnerability there? Okay, so actually, as we can see there, not everyone thinks it's a vulnerability. Why? Because you need a strong prerequisite, which is the app key. So when we told Livewire team, they said, well, since you need the app key, we don't consider it as a security threat, so we won't patch it. So, well, from our perspective, it's totally a vulnerability. No worries about that. But since it's not considered a vulnerability, well, you can feel free to exploit, it's okay. And there is a full release of the tool we will do later. But just so you know, if you are vulnerable, you need to rotate your app key to patch the actual vulnerability. But the full Unmarshalling chain won't be patched at all. And another fun fact, as we demonstrated the tool Snipe IT was vulnerable to this full chain, we presented this vulnerability research a few months ago during NullCon, and it was pretty funny because, well, actually, NullCon team did use Snipe IT as one of their asset management, and after the vulnerability demonstration, they told us, well, how do you patch that? So actually, you just need to rotate the app key. So yeah, there is a way to patch it at least. And so, what's next? Because that's cool and all, but, well, having the app key is still a strong prerequisite. We can't agree more about that. But during our research, we did understand a lot of things about Livewire, the way they are doing their stuff, the way everything is connected together, and we found an actual way to have a remote command execution without any prerequisites. So we don't need the app key anymore, and this time it was, of course, quickly patched, I must say. And there is this CVE connected to it. So stay tuned. In a few weeks, months, we will publish a tool because there are a lot of months to patch. So if you do have Livewire, we will just recommend you to patch it before we do release it. So stay tuned. This one will hopefully have a fully dedicated presentation or a full blog post detail. So stay tuned for the rest of this security research. Thank you for your attention.